The continent of Laconis. Vast plains to the west and deep forests to the east. The continent has remained much the same over the centuries, regardless of who has owned the lands. Many races call this place home, and not just the ones in power. Empires and kingdoms form, grow, conquer, and then fall. Even when the mountains and hills are dug out, and the hordes cut and burn the forests, still the land persists. Laconis is home to empires, kingdoms, and even fledgling democracies, all keeping an eye on each other, looking for weaknesses or aggressions to signal the start of conflict. For now, at least, war is on a knife's edge. Minor conflicts not yet exploding into full-blown wars as alliances, raiders, and internal strife dissuade a total outbreak. The Republic of Tirala. Ruled by the Council, 7 lords famed for their combat prowess, who rule over the 7 armies of Tirala. The armies themselves are the main political factions of the Republic, holding a yearly tournament to elect the leader of the army, who then goes on to take a seat on the council. This makes them very warlike, a good thing, considering the empire to the north, Kanon, used to be their overlords, and the Horde of Gerg continually threatens and raids their borders and shores. To offset the threat of these powers, they currently have an alliance with the Kingdom of Rio Verde. The Empire of Kanon. The Empire and its ruler, Emperor Borogul, rule over the plains, savannas, and deserts in their domain with a strict and unfair hand. Borogul and his predecessors are the gatekeepers of death, who are the conduit to the afterlife for all the citizens of the Empire. If you wish to proceed to the afterlife, the Emperor must allow you passage, and when the Emperor dies and is succeeded, new consumes the old, maintaining their connection to the afterlife. The Empire is looking to new and lost lands, always wanting to bring more souls into the fold to serve the Emperor and his ever-hungry desires. The Horde of Gerg, a loose collection of tribes and cities. The Orcs of Gerg claimed the land long ago when their legendary leader, Gerg, blessed by the gods, decided to organize and settle his people from their disorganized and raiding ways. They still raid and pirate, although now they have a land and homes to return to. Often, their neighbors hear the rumbling of their cavalry or sails of their ships, signaling a ravaging of the nearby area. Allied to none and raiding any and all they can, many orcs outside of Gerg make sure to make the distinctions between themselves and the Horde. The Shogunate of Doan. The elves of Laconis have never been a strong power in the land, but the Ando have always been a noble and refined peoples, retaining more of their ancestry and nobility than any others. While their emperor may be a puppet to the great clans, and the minor clans run rampant, warring on each other in minor squabbles, it is not advised to anger this power, as their knowledge and application of war is second to none. Their weapons and armor much desired by everyone else on the continent. The shogunate is decadent and stuck in its ways. However, producing and maintaining a mighty warrior class helps them secure their borders and their way of life against anything that threatens them. The Grand Duchy of Irshall. Newly independent, the Grand Duchy formed following the collapse of the Honorian Empire. Now run by the Duke and his council, they see to it that their peoples remain free and happy, the scars of oppression still fresh in the mind of their elders, while more democratic and free than nearly any of the other powers. Problems always arise from freedoms, and you can't please everyone. Although small and relatively powerless, any power trying to take the duchy by force will see themselves countered by all other neighboring powers, and thus the duchy is able to persist, although tentatively. The Commonwealth of Narak. The Commonwealth is an experiment, with two major races and cultures being a part of it. The humans, called the Honor, formerly of the Honorian Empire, and the Dwarves, known as the Dunir. With the Dunir being slightly more successful as traders and navigators, they are most commonly captains and merchants, and as a result, are often richer and more involved in the politics of the Commonwealth. This leads to slight tension between the two, but so far, nothing major. With ancient ties to Kindur-Azur, the mountain home, they mostly concentrate inwards and ignore the politics of the outside realms. It is, however, hard to ignore the greasy gaze of the diocese to the south. The Gazian Diocese. Crusades, inquisitors, secret police, and slavery. All these horrors and more are practiced inside the Gazian Diocese. With their sole deity and their sole-appointed leader, the Qianpo, often leaving the running of the country to the council, the ones who elect the new Qianpo when needed, corruption is rife, and unrest, starvation, and oppression is rampant and easy to find. The diocese is universally hated and has poor relations with all, but is also a large lumbering war machine and, if it's roused, a holy crusade bringing death and lamentation will inevitably make its way to your borders. The Empire of Kindur-Azur. The Under-Empire of Kindur-Azur. Dwarves living, as dwarves should, in deep, vast tunnels in the largest and richest mountains on the continent. Very isolationist, as has now become tradition, the Emperor Brodwin is advised and assisted by the old mining families, the ones who own the best ore veins, the richest halls, and the most subjects. They do trade, but never treaty with the other powers, although an exception may be made for their ancient cousins, the Dunir in Narak. Do not ask them about their religion. It really is rather silly. The Republic of Thilalan. The Republic is the truest democracy, with a Senate and a Speaker, but no leader. Representatives are elected from the cities and surrounds. Currently, they are in open rebellion against the diocese, having succeeded from them in recent years. They have been spared the wrath of a crusade, however, as the diocese has not organized a significant force against them. Yet, the Aid of Elves are more fond of rivers than the sea, and are celebrating their freedoms from the slavery they were under. But not happy with just their freedom, they also look to their brethren still under the yoke of the diocese, with more freedoms in mind. The Abathian Kingdom, ruled by two dark elven rulers at a time. The potent monarch rules the internal kingdom of the Abath peoples, keeping an iron hand controlling its citizens and maintaining law and order. The Shadow Monarch rules the external policy, often leading large raiding fleets or invasions to claim land, plunder, and captives back to the kingdom. The Abathian Kingdom holds no truce and brokers no peace. They raid all along the coast, the only concern being which city or town looks the least defended and the most prosperous. The Kingdom of Rio Verde. King Baruchiel and his line have been the royal family of the Rian humans. However, due to being very open, welcoming, and only acquiring territories slowly over the years through alliances and agreements, it is the most diverse in its citizenry and open to all, and their religions as well. Being a buffer between Canon and the diocese means they need to maintain alliances with the other powers as best they can. A large feature of the kingdom is the city of Rio Verde, a large and prosperous port city and anchor for the kingdom's power. There are more smaller communities and cultures dotted all around the continent. All races, all religions exist and operate in where they are welcome, or in the remote areas around the land. Some even come from other continents, further away, though those that survive the journey here are rare. The city of Rio Verde. To know of the capital city, you must know of its areas, its districts. As with any city, there are shady streets and prosperous zones, and to step wrong can lead to a dangerous situation, whether you run into trouble with the gangs, the nobles, or the city guard. The Ivy Roads, the richest area of the city, filled with manors, mansions, a few magic schools, and plenty of suspicious eyes. Any wanderer without purpose hanging around its streets will quickly find themselves hanging from a bridge. The Cyan Keep. Originally, the keep was intended to guard against raiders on the coast, or as a holdout against any invasion forces. It is now the home of the king and a rallying point when needed. Mostly out of bounds to common citizenry, it is possible, sometimes, to spy the royal guard and members of the court around the city, and even occasionally the king will be spotted, usually with pomp and ceremony. The Sunrise Market. Sitting on top of a hill, it is a large and suspicious plateau, and it is debated whether the light from the sun hits the market or the keep first on a new day. But the market is definitely the most active at that time, with merchants setting a large forest of stalls and tables to sell their wares from. Sometimes traveling even from other countries to take advantage of the prosperous city folk. The Sunset Harbour. While officially a secondary small section of the harbour of the city, it is also frequented by less reputable captains and trader ships looking to smuggle things in and out at night, and is a hub for criminals and smugglers. The Umbra Gate, the main area of officials and minor administrators. It is often seen as the main source of corruption and petty subversion of the law. It is home to the main guards hall and many domiciles for taxmen and harbour masters and their ilk. Anthill and Charheath. Industry, blacksmithies, markets and shops. Anthill is where you'll find all manners of items and gear, along with domiciles for those type of workers. In Charheath, residential citizenry, nothing remarkable, often just a place where people simply live. Additionally, it is the area where all the myriad temples and dedications to gods exist. The hazy harbour. Ships come in, ships go out. Also, an area of warehouses and taverns and the like. The Guild Registrar Office, for groups looking to establish a guild or organisation inside the city officially. Ashreach and North Sprawl. Tanners, undertakers, all of the less enviable jobs are out here on the edge of the city in Ashreach. But most of the citizens of Rio Verde tend to refer to it as the city's ash hole. In North Sprawl, an area that homes the less fortunate, unable to reside in the city proper, and mostly ignored by the officials and anyone of import. Very often, it is a holdover area for those looking to move into the city in the future. Dusk Valley, an area of ill repute and home to brigands, ruffians, and rapscallions, all types who are a part of the city, but prefer to avoid the gaze of the law. Wheatfield, originally actually a field of wheat to feed the city. It is now home to farmers, farmhands, and those who travel out to the countryside to tend to the fields and ranches. The vast majority who live here choose to, as it helps to avoid the tariffs of entering the city and the hassle of passing the guards on the gate. These citizens, however, are relied upon for their food production, so are watched over and protected well. The Wandering Inn, a classic drinking establishment filled with adventurers, residents, and housing a bulletin board filled with missions, requests, and jobs for freelancers and guild members alike. Now, armed with the knowledge needed, venture out to make your fortune, or fall to ruin, accompanied by the laughter of distant and lost gods.